The trouble began for My Lin the moment she spotted the Callahan ranch from the top of the last hill. The road from Lamy had been long, rough, and full of dust that clung to the silken fabric of her cheongsam and the edges of her worn boots. She held her small leather sewing bag tight against her chest like it was the only safe thing she owned. The wagon driver who brought her charged her $2, half her weekly earnings, and every bump in the road reminded her of the risk she had taken. She thought she had been hired for simple sewing work, maybe hemming shirts for ranch hands or stitching a dress for someone's daughter. Nothing complicated, nothing fancy, but the scene waiting below did not match anything she expected. The ranch yard looked like something from a dream she did not belong in. Ribbons in dark red and cream hung from every rail, lifting and falling in the wind like flags announcing a festival. Tables stretched across the yard loaded with food My Lin had only smelled from far windows. Roasted venison, fresh pies, thick cornbread stacked high. Bottles of whiskey that cost more than she could earn in a month. Fiddlers tuned their instruments near the barn while women in silk dresses and polished gloves gathered in small circles, whispering behind smiling mouths. Men in tailored vests and brand-new Stetsons smoked cigars that filled the air with sweet, sharp smoke. My Lin's traditional cheongsam, with its high collar and intricate fastenings, suddenly felt too foreign, too conspicuous, too wrong. Her neatly pinned hair felt plain, and the eyes of fancy strangers slid over her like she was something messy that had blown in with the dust. Her stomach twisted. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. This wasn't sewing work. This was a celebration. A big one. A betrothal announcement. The kind that joined two wealthy frontier families together with land and power. She didn't belong here. She needed to turn around, find Mrs. Albright, and ask why she had been sent to a place like this. But before she could move, a loud voice cut across the yard. "Girl, you there?" The shout froze her in place. A man stumbled toward her, red-faced from whiskey, wearing an expensive suit that smelled like tobacco. He looked her up and down with cold judgment. "Fetch me whiskey, the imported kind, and move those sewing scraps." "You're blocking the path." My Lin's throat tightened. She tried to speak, but he only waved her off like she was less than nothing. Laughter rose around her. The sting of humiliation burned hotter than the sun on her neck. Her feet backed up on their own, desperate to escape, but her heel caught on uneven ground and she stumbled. Before she hit the dirt, strong hands caught her. The grip was steady, warm, sure hands that handled wild horses and hard work every day. My Lin froze as a deep voice spoke behind her. "Easy there." She looked up and her breath left her. Rhett Callahan, the richest cattleman in 3 territories, the man everyone whispered about. The man whose land stretched farther than most folks' hopes. At 31 years old, he had built a ranch people called a legend. But the man holding her now didn't look like the powerful figure she had imagined. He looked tense, angry, cornered, and he was staring straight at her. For one long second, she forgot the yard full of strangers and the shame burning in her chest. His eyes were a stormy blue-gray, sharp, and focused on her like she was the only person standing in the whole Wyoming territory. Then something changed in that gaze. A decision, a spark, a plan forming in an instant. Rhett leaned down close enough that his breath brushed her hair. "Darling," he whispered low and urgent. "I need you to pretend something for me." And My Lin blinked at him. "Pretend what?" His hand slid from her shoulder to her hand, fingers lacing tightly with hers. Not hesitant, not unsure, like he had done it 1,000 times. "Pretend to be my wife." The word slammed into her like a runaway stallion. Before she could speak, before she could even breathe, Rhett raised their joined hands high where everyone could see. His arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side with the confident ease of a man deeply familiar with the woman he held. The yard went still. The music stopped. Conversations died. Rhett's voice rose clear and strong across the quiet. "This here is my wife." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The blonde woman in rose-colored silk, clearly the bride-to-be, went pale as frost. His mother looked ready to collapse. The drunk man backed away in confusion. My Lin could only stare, stunned as Rhett held her close, warm and solid and terrifying in the way he had suddenly flipped her world upside down. He leaned down again, voice steady for the crowd, but meant only for her. "Please," he murmured. "Just follow my lead." She didn't know why she nodded. Maybe because refusing would humiliate them both. Maybe because the anger in the crowd scared her. Maybe because she felt something in his grip that wasn't force, but a plea. The fiddler started playing again, shaky and confused. Rhett pulled her onto the dance floor like it was the most natural thing in the world. His hand settled at her waist. His steps guided hers gently, easily, as if he meant to protect her with every motion. "You're shaking," he whispered. "You just told these people we're married," she managed. "Yeps, we're not married. Nope, your mother looks like she wants to bury me alive." Yep, something inside my Lin snapped and a tiny, shocked laugh escaped her chest. Rhett's lips twitched. The first real smile she had seen on his face. And for one fleeting moment, dancing with him in that storm of lies and judgment, she felt safe, dangerously safe. She wasn't sure whether that scared her more than the lie itself. The music ended. The crowd whispered like wildfire. And Rhett leaned in one last time. "Just a little longer," he said softly. "I promise I'll explain everything." But My Lin had no idea that stepping into his arms that day would change her entire life. And Rhett Callahan had no idea he had just broken the first rule of the dangerous bargain he was about to propose. He had touched her. He had held her. And that was the first step toward breaking the one condition he had sworn to keep. Never fall in love. My Lin woke before dawn the next morning, her heart still pounding from the chaos of the day before. She lay on her narrow boarding house bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to distant footsteps on the stairs and the soft breathing of her mother in the next room. The walls felt thinner than ever. Her life felt thinner than ever. Nothing made sense anymore. Yesterday, she had walked into the Callahan ranch, expecting to take a few measurements. Instead, Rhett Callahan had grabbed her hand in front of half the Wyoming territory and called her his wife. His wife. The word had rung in her ears all night, settling in her chest like a stone and a spark at the same time. She could still feel the warmth of his hand at her waist. The steady way he had guided her across the dance floor, the strange safety she felt in his arms, even though her entire life was crashing around her. He had said he would explain. So she went. Her fingers trembled as she pinned her hair neat. She dressed in her best cheongsam, still modest compared to the silken velvet of the day before, but clean and presentable. She took a deep breath, stepped into the cold morning air, and walked toward the place where everything had begun to unravel. The Callahan ranch looked different today, quieter, the ribbons were gone, the tables cleared, ranch hands moved across the yard with practiced ease, tending to chores like nothing had happened. But something had happened, something that felt too big to fit inside her chest. When Rhett stepped out onto the porch, her breath caught again. He looked nothing like the powerful man who had pulled her into the desperate lie. He wore a simple shirt rolled at the sleeves, work trousers, and boots scuffed with real life. His hair was damp, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked almost human, not the untouchable cattle king the rumors painted him to be. "Morning, Miss Lin," he said, voice steady, though something flickered behind his eyes. "Morning," she whispered. "Come inside. We need to talk." The house was warm and smelled faintly of coffee. Rhett led her to a small study filled with books and neatly stacked ledgers. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." She sat on the edge, hands folded tightly in her lap. "I owe you an apology," Rhett began, leaning against the desk, arms crossed. My Lin blinked. "An apology for putting you in a mess you didn't ask for." His jaw tightened. "I shouldn't have dragged you into that." "Then why did you?" she asked softly. He hesitated just a moment, but long enough for her to see the truth. He had been desperate. "My mother arranged a marriage," Rhett said finally. "Not one I wanted. Not one I agreed to. But she pushed and pushed until, well, you saw the crowd yesterday." He scrubbed a hand over his jaw. "I wasn't about to be walked into a business merger like a bull led to slaughter, so you lied?" My Lin asked. I acted, he corrected, though the word held no confidence. And you chose me, she whispered before she could stop herself. Rhett's eyes met hers. You were being mocked. Humiliated. I wasn't going to stand there and let that happen. Not to you. Heat rushed up her neck. She looked away quickly, but not before she saw something in his gaze she couldn't name. He reached into his vest and handed her a folded sheet of paper. Read this. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. It was a contract. A real contract. In clear handwriting, it spelled out an arrangement so impossible she could barely process the words. In exchange for pretending to be Rhett Callahan's wife for 1 year, he would pay her mother's entire debt. He would set up a seamstress shop in town for her and pay the rent for a full year. He would give her her own rooms at the ranch and pay her $25 a month, more than she had ever dreamed of earning. Her vision blurred. It was more than kindness, more than generosity. It was life-changing. But one line stopped her cold. Neither party shall develop romantic feelings for the other. Her breath hitched. And if one of us does, Rhett said quietly, the contract ends immediately. My Lynn looked up at him, her heart shaking. Why that rule? She whispered. Rhett's eyes hardened. Not cold, not cruel, but guarded like a man protecting an old wound. Because feelings complicate things, he said. And I'm not interested in complications. This is a business deal. Nothing more but marriage, my Lynn began. This ain't marriage, Rhett cut in gently. It's pretend. You're helping me. I'm helping you. Clean and simple. Clean and simple. Nothing about this felt simple. She swallowed. And you think we can pretend for a whole year? If we're careful, he replied. And your family? The town? They'll believe whatever story we tell them. We need a good 1 inch. My Lynn stared down at the contract. Her mother's debt paid. A real future, a shop, a roof, a way out. It was everything she needed, but pretending to be his wife, living under the same roof as him, feeling his eyes on her like last night, that was dangerous. Still, what choice did she have? She lifted her face. I'll do it. Rhett didn't smile. He only nodded once, firm, grateful, and something else she couldn't read. He handed her the pen. Sign, Miss Lynn. Her fingers trembled slightly as she wrote her name. He signed beneath it. Just like that, with ink on paper, My Lynn became the pretend wife of the richest and most emotionally guarded cowboy in Wyoming territory. Only pretend, only temporary. But as Rhett walked her to the door, his hand brushed hers. Just barely, just enough to send a spark straight through her chest. And My Lynn knew already, nothing about this would stay pretend for long. My Lynn tried to settle into her new life, but nothing about pretending to be Rhett Callahan's wife ever felt simple. Not when his kindness kept surprising her. Not when his silence said more than his words. Not when living under the same roof meant fighting feelings she promised not to have. At first, everything stayed careful. They ate meals with the ranch hands. They walked through town side by side while people whispered. They repeated their rehearsed story whenever anyone asked how they met. Rhett treated her with respect. He never crossed lines, never touched her unless the role required it. But those small touches, his hand at the small of her back, his fingers brushing hers in a crowded room, left her breathless every time. And then came the night of the storm. Thunder shook the ranch house, and rain hammered against the windows like rocks. My Lynn sat in the parlor stitching when the door burst open. Rhett walked in soaked from head to toe. Water streamed off him, his shirt clinging to his chest and shoulders. His hair dripped onto the floor and the cold wind behind him cut straight through the room. My Lynn shot to her feet. Your drenched storm rolled in fast, he said, shaking out his hat. Had to tie down the barn doors. You'll get sick, she muttered, stepping closer before caution could stop her. Rhett turned toward the fire, trying to warm himself. Steam rose from his clothes, his boots squished with every step. She should have walked away. She should have kept distance, but seeing him shiver made something deep in her chest twist. I'll make coffee, she said. Go change before you freeze. He didn't move at first. He just looked at her. Really looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his storm-colored eyes. You worry too much, he murmured. Someone has to, she whispered back. The air shifted, warm, heavy, almost dangerous. Then thunder cracked again, loud enough to shake the walls. My Lin jumped and Rhett's hand shot out on instinct, catching her elbow. It should have been nothing, a simple touch, but the heat of his hand spread through her like fire. His fingers lingered, his eyes dropped slowly to her mouth. The room felt too quiet, the fire too bright, his nearness too strong. For one terrifying moment, she thought he might kiss her. But he pulled back suddenly. I should change, he said gruffly. And coffee sounds good. He walked away fast, boots trailing water, leaving My Lin alone with a heart beating out of her chest. After the storm, everything became harder to ignore. Rhett's eyes lingered too long. My Lin's breath caught too easily. The house felt smaller every day, like the walls were pushing them closer together, and pretend felt thinner than paper. Their breaking point came on a quiet night in the parlor. My Lin was mending a shirt. Rhett sat across from her, watching the fire. Something about the silence felt soft and easy, like they were a real married couple sharing a real peaceful evening. It scared her more than the storm did. Can I ask you something? Rhett said suddenly. Of course, why'd you agree? Back at the party, why'd you say yes? My Lin's needle paused. You needed help. I knew what that felt like. Rhett stared at the fire for a long time before answering. You think you don't belong here, he said quietly. But you do. More than you know. Her heart stumbled. And you, she whispered. Where do you belong, Rhett? Behind rules and walls so thick no one can reach you. His jaw tightened. This wasn't supposed to get complicated. It already is, My Lin said. She stood, frustrated, tears building. Why do you pull away every time things get honest? Because this isn't real. It feels real. It's not. Then prove it, she said, voice trembling. Let go of me. But he didn't. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands catching her shoulders. His touch was warm, firm, shaking a little. My Lin, he whispered, a plea, a warning, a confession. She rose onto her toes and closed that last impossible inch between them. Rhett broke. He kissed her like a man starved, like he had been holding back for weeks and couldn't anymore. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against him. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger that left her breathless. She gripped his shirt, desperate, lost in him. The world fell away. It was the most real thing she had ever felt. But when they finally pulled apart, breathless and shaking, Rhett staggered back like he'd touched fire. We can't, he rasped. The contract, damn the contract, she whispered, tears burning. Tell me the truth. Tell me you feel nothing. Rhett looked at her like the truth was tearing him apart. Then he said the words that shattered everything. You need to pack your things. The silence hit like a bullet. What? You broke the rules, he said, voice hard with fear, not anger. You said you had feelings. That ends the deal. You're ending this because I fell in love with you. He flinched. My Lin, don't. You're scared, she whispered. That's all this is. You're scared to be hurt again. Pack your things, he said, barely louder than a breath. Please. And he walked out. My Lin's world cracked. By sunrise, she was gone from the ranch, back in her shop in town, stitching with trembling hands and a broken heart. Rhett lasted 3 days. 3 days of empty halls. 3 days of reaching for someone who wasn't there. 3 days of realizing he had thrown away the only thing he had ever wanted. On the 4th morning, he stood in the doorway of her shop, looking like a man who hadn't slept. My Lin, he said softly. Can we talk? She stepped outside, heart pounding. Rhett took off his hat, hands shaking. I'm sorry, he said. I was wrong about everything. I'm done hiding behind rules. I love you. I've loved you for weeks, and I'm asking you, begging you to give me another chance. Tears filled her eyes. Rhett, I'll tear up the contract, he whispered. I'll write a new one. Or none at all. I don't care. Just don't walk away from me. My Lynn didn't walk away. She stepped forward and kissed him with all the love she had tried so hard not to feel. When they broke apart, Rhett pressed his forehead to hers. No more pretending, he whispered. Never again. And right there on a quiet Lamy street, they finally chose each other. Not for convenience, not for a contract, but for love.